In this lesson, we're going to learn about the loops, otherwise known as iterations. Loops allow us to repeat the execution of statements or block of codes. And in Python, we have two types of loops. We'll have the for loop and the while loop. We're going to be starting with the for loop, which happens to be one of the most popular looping constructs in Python. So we have the for loop. And this is how we implement the for loop. First, we're going to have the for keyword followed by a variable. So we can have something like for num. Then the in keyword and a sequence. So have nums. I've not yet defined the sequence, so I'm going to define it. So I can have nums is equal to, I'm going to be using a sequence of numbers, otherwise known as list or list of numbers. So I'm going to have my square bracket, then I'll have the values separated by commas. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So here I have print num. So let's run the program. So what happens is that when you perform a loop, you are repeating the execution of statements. Inside this for loop, we'll have the print statement. So what happens is that in our sequence, we have 5 values or 5 numbers. And in the course of the iteration or in the course of the looping, it starts by assigning this variable to the first item in the sequence, which is 1. Now, when we say print num, it is going to display 1. Now, it gets to the second item, which is 2. So what happens is that it is going to assign this variable to this value. And as such, when we say print num, it displays 2. It moves over to the next value, which is 3, assigns it to the variable num, and then will display the num, which is 3. And this is how it goes on and on until it gets to the last item or the last value in the sequence. Then apart from just printing out the values, I can as well have something like print hello. So let's run this. We'll have hello displayed 5 times. So what happens is that the loop starts with the first item in the sequence 1. So it assigns num to that value, which is 1. But in this case, we're not printing out the num. We're simply printing out hello. So that is how we got this first hello. It goes over to this one and assigns it to num. And in our print statement here, we're printing hello. So in essence, because we're not printing out the num or the values, we're simply going to repeat the execution of this statement 5 times, which is the number of items in this sequence. So assuming I have something like 1, 2, and 3, what this means is that the print statement is only going to execute 3 times. Then apart from looping through or iterating through a sequence of numbers or a list of numbers, we can also use a function known as the range function. So this is how the range function works. First, I'm going to remove this, and here I can have 4. As usual, we provide a variable. In this case, I can say num in range, then I'll provide a parenthesis. Inside the parenthesis, I can put a value like 5. The range function allows us to generate a sequence of numbers. So I'm going to have print num. So let's run it and see the output. And as we can see, we have 0 to 4. So when you have range 5, what this means is that you want to generate 5 numbers starting from 0 and the number before the number specified here. So if I have 10 here, It means that I want to generate numbers from 0 to 9. And as you can see, we have 0 to 9. Now, apart from printing the values in the sequence of numbers generated by the range function, I can simply use the range function to repeat the execution of statements or block of codes inside the for loop as many times as I want. So I can as well have something like print hello. So what this means is that I want to repeat the execution of this statement 10 times. So as you can see, we'll have hello 10 times. Now let me go back to printing the numbers. So I'm going to have print num. Of course, this is going to give us 0 to 9. But another good thing about the range function is that you can specify where you want to start generating the numbers. So by default, it starts from 0, but you can specify where you want to start generating the numbers. So if I want to start from 5, I can put 5 here and put a comma. So this is going to generate numbers from 5 all the way to the number before 10, which is 9. So if I have 1 here, it is going to generate 1 to 9. And this means that if I want to generate 1 to 10, I need to have this to be 11. So this will give us 1 to 10. Then the next thing we're going to introduce in our range function is what we'll call the step. So let's have 2 here. This is the start, this is the stop, and this is the step. So let's run this. As you can see, we have 1, we have 3, we have 5, 7, and 9. Now let me change this to 1, which is the default. And this is just going to give us 1 to 10. So what happens is that when you put the step value here, if the first value is 1, the next value is going to be 1 plus this step, which will give us 3. So let's run it. So you have 1. The next value is going to be 1 plus 2, which is 3. The next one is going to be 3 plus 2, which is 5. The next one is going to be 5 plus 2, which is 7. The next one is going to be 7 plus 2, which is 9. The next one is going to be 9 plus 2, which is 11. And this is outside the scope of the range function, because range functions generate numbers from a certain point to a value before the stop value. So but assuming we have something like 12 here, we're going to have 1 to 11. So this is about the step. Now I can change this to 3. Let me change this one to 10. And here we have 1, 4, and 7. After this 7, we're supposed to have 7 plus 3, which is 10. But because the stop value is 10, the program ended at 7, because the last value generated by the range function is supposed to be less than the stop value. Now let's take some examples. Here we're going to use the for loop to determine squares in a list of numbers. So we're going to be determining squares. And here we're going to have nums is equal to, I'm going to be providing the values. So we'll have 1 to 5. Now I'm going to have the for. Here we'll have num in nums. And I'm going to have result as a variable is equal to num raised to power 2. Now we're going to print the result. And this will give us the squares in the numbers inside of this list. So here we have 1, 4, 9, 16, and 25. Now we're going to have another example. In this example, we're going to have nums is equal to, let me have 1, 4, 7, and 8. and we want to determine the sum of these values. And to do this, I'm going to first have a variable called total and assign it to a value 0. Now we're going to have our for loop. Here we have for num in nums. Here we're going to have total is equal to total plus num. Or better still, we can use a shortcut. The shortcut for this is total plus equal to num. So both of these statements will give us the same outcome. So let me remove this. Let's go with shortcut. And here, after the loop, I'm going to print out the total. So we can have print total. So let's see the outcome. We have 20. And if you compute this manually, 1 plus 4 is 5, 5 plus 7 is 12, 12 plus 8 is 20. Now in the next example, we're going to be using the for loop to determine even numbers in a sequence of numbers or in a collection of numbers. So we have even numbers. We can as well use the same program to determine the odd numbers. And for this example, I'm going to be using the range function. So we have for num in range, let's say 1 to 10. I want to generate numbers 1 to 10 inclusive, which means I'm going to have 1 and have 11. Now, first of all, let's print out the numbers to be sure that we're generating the right numbers. So have print num. And from the output, you can see we generated the right numbers that we want to generate. Now, to get the even numbers, I'm going to be using the if statement. So instead of just printing print num, I'm going to have if num, then the modulo 2 is equal to 0. This means that the number is an even number. Then print num. So what this means is that this is going to skip numbers that are not divisible by 2. In essence, it is only printing the even numbers. And if we run it, you can see we have only the even numbers 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. If we're interested in the odd numbers, instead of equal to 0, we change this to equal to 1. So this is going to give us the odd numbers. So these are for the odd numbers. If we want the even numbers, we'll change this to 0, and this will give us the even numbers. Now let's look at another example. This particular example, I normally use it a lot of times to teach the for loop, and this is multiplication table. And for this example, I'm going to be generating something that looks like this. We're going to have something like 1 multiplied by 1 is equal to 1. And we have 1 multiplied by 2 is equal to 2. We'll have 1 multiplied by 3 is equal to 3. So this is basically like a 1 times table. We can as well use the same program to get 2 times table, 3 times table, 4 times table, and so on. So first, we're going to have the multiplication table that we want to generate, maybe 1 times, 2 times, or 3 times. So I can have something like value is equal to 2. Now I'm going to have my for loop, and here we have for num in range 1 to 13. So what this means is that I want to generate numbers 1 to 12. So let's print out to be sure. So have print num. And from the output, you can see we have 1 to 12. Now the next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to have a variable here called result. And for this result, I'm going to have value multiplied by num. Here I'm going to have print result. And here is the output. And from what you can see here, 2 times 1 is equal to 2, 2 times 2 is equal to 4. But we want to get our output to display in this form. And to do this, instead of printing result, I can have print. Here we have value, then a comma. Then I'm going to be using X to represent multiplication. So I will have X here, then I'll put a comma, and I'm going to be providing the num. So we have num here, then a comma, then I'll put an equality symbol, then a comma, and then provide the result. So we'll have result. Now let's run the program, and as you can see, we have our 2 times table. If we want to generate the 3 times table, I'll simply change this to 3, and this will generate the 3 times table for us. If we want maybe 11 times table, this will generate the 11 times table for us. Apart from displaying the multiplication table using print in this way, we can use a concept known as the F string, which we'll learn more when we get to strings. So for demonstration purposes, I'm going to just simply implement it so that you can see an alternative way of displaying the multiplication table the way it is presented in the output. So first, I'm going to remove this print statement. And here I'm going to have an F, then put a quotation mark. Then I'll provide the placeholders. I'll put another placeholder here, and I'll put another placeholder here. For the first placeholder, I'm going to have value. Then I'll put an X here, then provide num. Then put equal to. Then I'm going to have num multiplied by value. Now I can go ahead and say print result. Run it, and it will give us the same outcome. So this is basically how you generate the multiplication table using the for loop.